Good afternoon. Welcome to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding the light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. To represent Black excellence today in the atmosphere, the epitome of Black excellence, we have WSU Human Rights and Social Impact Fellow, author, producer, motivational speaker, community organizer, and social activist. She is the third daughter of Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz, and a trustee for the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Educational Center, the Malcolm X Foundation, and the Harlem Symphony Orchestra. As of 2017, she is an adjunct professor of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. We are talking about this beautiful, amazing lady, Dr. Ilyasah Shabazz.
Oh, that's so sweet. You're amazing. You really, really are. And I hope someone is giving you your accolades because the work that you do precedes you. And I think that there are so many people who are so grateful to the work that you continue to do, especially championing African Americans, Indigenous Americans, um, the history that existed before Christopher Columbus came here. But it's really, thank you.
Receiving this from you, it's like receiving a Tony Award. That's how I feel. I
Okay, well
got
then
a
I'll have to
Tony
get one.
today. I got a Tony today because you know
Okay.
I love you. We have known each other so many years, and you have shown your friendship to me in many, many ways, and I will never forget the things you've done. You have kept the memory and legacy of your dad and mom alive and at the center of a civil rights fight discourse. Although you were only 2 years old when your dad was assassinated, what has prompted in you to be the one to bear the torch?
To be the one. Well, I can talk about my
Mhm.
um the work that I've done. My mother, my mother is my rock. When I think about my mother, I share with my students that February 14th, Valentine's Eve, about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, she and her husband, Malcolm X, are in bed asleep, and a firebomb is thrown into our home. It damaged the home. We had to move out of the home. And fortunately, we all escaped alive, unaffected by the fire physically. And then a week later, that my father would call his wife, his young pregnant wife, who wasn't quite 30, to tell her, come to the Audubon Ballroom. And, because he was going to share his confederation with the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And she came, she was excited, only to witness him assassinated, martyred, gunned down by 21 bullets on February 21st. And so I always say, how can someone who was certainly traumatized, she lost her husband, her partner, her protector, her best friend, how did she survive? She raised us with so much love in our household. Our foundation was built on love. And how was she able to do that? She never accepted no or I can't as an answer. She has inspired me tremendously. The greatest gift that my parents both gave me was the capacity to love who we are the way she raised us. And that is the model on which I base my curriculum in teaching and writing books. Whatever it is I do, it is from that lens.
And it shows through every action you do
Mm.
and every moment you share with others. You are, to me, my hero of today, like your father was my hero of then. And you know, I told you many times, your father is the reason why I'm in Harlem, because I read his autobiography and I wanted to see what he was talking about. That's why I'm here. So, and the fact that we met,
Mhm.
it's been like it was meant to be. I met
Mhm.
you. I had no idea who you were. You invited me in your home. We spent a whole afternoon together. I still had no idea you were Malcolm X's daughter. It was incredible.
And it was
So
also you were with a very dear friend of mine
yes,
at the time, and right, and I connected with you. But
yes.
what was it that you heard about my father? What was it about him that inspired you?
Oh, just reading his autobiography. When I was a little girl, I remember hearing on TV Malcolm X. And that name, Malcolm X, when I was very little, stayed with me. And later on, when I was a little older, I saw his autobiography and I read it. And when I read it, I said, oh my God. So I was for the Black Panther Party, Angela Davis, Malcolm X. I was like for that. And when I was 13, 14, my first year in high school, I was participating in all the student demonstrations, and I was the only one at that age. Everybody else was college students. I was their mascot. I don't know. I always had that in me. I don't know. It's they
In your
represented
blood.
they represented exactly what my aspirations were.
Mm-hmm.
I found them in there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come to you. It's you we are
Well,
talking
that's
about.
really interesting though, because that means you must be an empath of sorts,
Yes,
right? That this passion for humanity, for justice must be deep at your core.
yes, yes. I feel I feel it very, it's like it turns my stomach sometimes. I
Intrinsically,
can't
yeah.
stand it.
Hmm.
It really, it's like it had happened to me. So I think I was in a past life. I was
Yeah.
that because it's too strong.
Hmm.
I feel it in my body.
Hmm.
So let's talk about your books. As an author, you penned many, many books about Malcolm and Betty, some in collaboration with other authors. All won or were nominated for the NAACP Image Awards and more awards like the Coretta Scott King Award. Tell us a bit about each one of them. We start with 2002 Growing Up X, a memoir. 2014 Malcolm Little, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm X. 2014 again, The Diary of Malcolm X, 1964. And this is a record of his thoughts when he went to the Mecca. And your mom, she went to the Mecca the year after your father was killed in 1965, and you yourself went to the Mecca in 2006. 2015, X, a novel. 2018, Betty Before X, and 2021, The Awakening of Malcolm X. And lastly, last December 2025, to celebrate the 100 years of the life and legacy of Malcolm X, you celebrated at the iconic Symphony Space in New York with a special release of the autobiography of Malcolm X, which had a power forward by your elder sister, Ambassador Atala Shabazz. Tell us.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's a lot of books.
Yeah.
You know, as a Muslim, I learned when I made Hajj that there are three pillars to fulfill. One is to make Hajj, another is to have an institution. Well, maybe there's four. An institution or institution and books about the legacy of, right? The work that you've done, your body of work, which means that each of us is supposed to give some, right, make a contribution back to
Mhm.
society, right? And especially when you think 100 years from now, we won't be here. So it's living your life very purposeful, very intentional, right? And another one was to climb Mount Arafat and pray to Allah, pray to God for your parents to have a seat close to God. So I made sure when I went and made Hajj, right, which was this, sacred invitation, if you will, to go back to the land of the Torah, of the Quran, of the Bible, right? And so the books, the information, the work, right? That was all a part of my responsibility as a person who believes in God, and who loves humanity, my people, right? All people. So Growing Up X was my first book. It was a coming of age memoir. Um, Malcolm, little boy who grew up to become Malcolm X, was important. I thought children could learn from and see a reflection of themselves. Because
Yeah,
when I wrote the children's book, there were barely no children's books with people of color.
that's right. I
Now they're
remember.
plentiful, which is great. And then the rest of the books, it's the Betty Before X for young girls to be able to open up a book to learn about the struggle in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 40s and 50s, really, to learn about self-acceptance, to learn about activism, all these things that were prevalent at the time that I wrote the book. Self-acceptance. All of my books have something to do with inspiring and teaching and understanding our role to society, our role as human beings that have been removed.
Yeah.
When we look at the walls of the pyramids, there's all of this instruction, right? When we
Yes.
think about what it is to become a girl going into womanhood, what it is for a girl to go into marriage, what it is for a boy to go into manhood. There was always instruction, but now there's nothing.
Hmm.
So we think, oh, well, maybe my life is, I'm here to get a good job and make a lot of money and buy all the things I want, when there's so much more depth. And when we learn about that, then we live our lives more intentional, right? And that's what my new book is about. Malcolm in the Desert, the spiritual, wisdom gained from the wisdom from the spiritual transformation of Malcolm X. I'm surprised I don't have it right here because I've been talking about it a lot. Have
Yes,
you seen
and
it?
I've seen it, of course.
It's
That's one of
brilliant.
the reasons why we are doing this, because we want to talk about that now. Because you are going to release this book on May 18. You're launching that book. And on May 19, you're celebrating Malcolm X 101 years, and both events are happening at the Shabazz Center in Harlem. So tell us a little bit more about this new book.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
So,
amazing.
yes. So my father's one, first of all, he was unalived, martyred, assassinated, gunned down when he was 39 years old.
Yes.
Today, I am old enough to be my father's mother. And I say his age because to have made this enormous impact, this enduring
Yeah.
impact, right? Um, at a young age in the 1960s, when you look at his body of work, that he traveled the world during a time when African Americans didn't even have their humanity. They still weren't even considered, human beings, right? And so when I made my Hajj, I was so grateful to think about that my father was on a plane traveling, that he was treated like a dignitary, like a world leader, that the king of Arabia, King Faisal, welcomed him to the palace. He stayed there. Just everything that he was able to experience, right? That we take for granted. When he saw blacks and whites in the manner
Mm-hmm.
that it was so different than blacks and whites in America. and that he would be praying next to, and all of these things that we really do take for granted, right? And so, yes, it definitely um, gave him a new perspective. But in this book, I'm able to address the mischaracterizations about him and also allow for all of us who are witnessing all of the wars, the inhumanity. We look in our phones, at our social media, we see these
Very.
horrific things, but we keep scrolling it. And what is it doing to us? And so it is allowing us a moment to get quiet with ourselves, just as my father had to. When I read his diary, I saw where many times he wrote about how lonely he felt. But
Wow.
you have to be alone in order to go through this transformation, in order to communicate with God or to go deep within ourselves. And so this book, I write about my father being in a very challenging space, emotionally, physically, psychologically. He discovers this organization to which he dedicated his life and work, that there were some challenges there
Mhm.
that weren't in sync with his own moral principles, right? His moral compass um, allowed him to just travel, dig deep, and how he was able to um, glean from that experience, allowing the reader to do the same with their own, following along his journey. And then there's some sessions where, I say, sit quietly, get your journal, I ask you questions, and then we go back into the story. Until at the very end, it is my hope and prayer that we will find more intention and meaning with our own individual selves and, with our purpose here.
And what you're saying is fundamental because with all what that is happening and these disgraceful things that are happening, atrocious things that are happening, we are getting so affected that I've been having panic attacks. And it's very important to be able to go into ourselves. And your father, when you say he felt alone, because he was alone,
That's right.
he was abandoned. He was he was carrying forward such an important message that kept on being expressly misconstrued and misrepresented because they were scared of his power, of his charisma, of the truthfulness of his message. And someone like that, of course, is going to feel alone and he needs to go into himself.
That's right. And Muhammad Ali, I was looking for the quote that he had given me for I think it was X a Novel, was one of my books. He said something like, to have accomplished the kind of work that Malcolm accomplished, you had to be a man that walked alone, you know? And, because number one, there aren't going to be a lot of people who are, you know, able and committed to do that work at that time in your circle. And sometimes, it each of us has to just slow down and find that moment to understand whatever it is we need to understand personally right now.
Yes, yes, Ilyasah. And I saw a couple of days ago one of his interviews where he was saying about the importance of his trip, of his travel to the Mecca, how the fact that the king had invited him to stay in his palace made him feel like they are treating me like a human being here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like it's stories like that that really, ooh, it gets me in my core, right? Because what it does say is sometimes, we think about our children so many places in the world who are not allowed an opportunity to know that they're worthy of self-love, that
Yes.
they're worthy of many things. And I can't imagine, and that is what has propelled my work. I grew up knowing I was great, wonderful, beautiful. My mother made sure we learned about the contributions women made and so forth. Women, people of the African diaspora, from the first world perspective, not a third world minority,
Mhm.
right? And Islam, that, we learned about these significant contributions. So we grew up with a very solid sense of
Wonderful.
our identity. So we didn't rely on others to determine our self-worth, right? And so when I see you, I'm going to love you just as I love myself. I'm going to honor you and treat you just as I treat myself and would expect others to treat me the same. So I'm grateful for that. And and so I know, that sense of that deep sense of compassion and is a part of me as it was a part of my father and my mother.
Yes. Yes, you are definitely that the essence of those two amazing people. Let's talk a little bit about the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center, because that plays a very, very important role in maintaining and furthering their legacy. Tell us a little bit about all the important events that you organize in that center.
Oh boy. Well, what I will say is when you walk into the space, because it's where my father took his last breath, you feel it.
Yes.
And we always say when you walk in, we know the good people from the ones who aren't. When people who walk in and they're like, you feel it. You feel the
Mhm.
spirit. You feel something really beautiful. And so we take a lot of pride in putting together great productions. We want to make sure that there's a cultural experience, that there's an experience of love, that you feel it, that there's an experience of activism, you know, that we all understand that we are a part of the same human family.
Yeah.
And so anything we do intergenerational leadership development. We have a Malcolm X Fellows program. We have uh, people come for tours with Gay Anderson, who, if you look at our reviews, she's like our hidden gem. She's
Mhm.
incredible, the kinds of tours that she gives. Um, So, I mean, and I'm the chairperson of the board of directors, and I take a lot of pride in that. Is the last place that I spent with my mother before she passed away. And so I know how much she looked forward to retiring and continuing the work of her husband because for so long she safeguarded the integrity of his body of work. Because look, we all were taught that Malcolm was one thing, only to discover he was none of that,
Yeah.
you know? And even that my father, when he was in jail as a young man at 20, right? When he went to jail, he was in jail for a long time because they were dating white women, right?
Mhm.
And it was for robbery. And but that he was the star debater, that he read the dictionary not because he couldn't read or write, but because he
Wonderful.
had a love of words, etymology, to be his best self. And he was.
Mhm.
He was the star debater.
Mhm.
Um, just a lot of things that they were so impressed with his presentation on capital punishment in jail that they played it through the Boston airwaves the city, throughout the city of
Mhm.
Boston on the radio. So a lot of things. Yeah. And that's because of the values instilled in Malcolm by his parents. Because there's this fictitious story that you can go to jail an illiterate and walk out an icon. And the fact is that it's the foundation, of the family,
Yes.
that was
Because
instilled in
his
them.
parents were both very, very active, very cultured, and that is also something that is not very well known.
Yeah, that's right. And that his father was, a part of the Parent Teacher Association. He was on the PTA. He had a car, which they didn't have back then, but he had,
Mhm.
one of those long, I think,
Yes.
we saw I think it's called a two tub,
Family?
tub tambourine car, whatever. But it was where the front was really long and fancy. And that he was the chapter president of Universal Negro Improvement
Mhm.
Association, which commanded millions of followers back then, and he was friends and neighbors to Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. So there's so much, and his mother being an activist, and books written on her,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so it is that his parents were activists. They were very steeped in education, culture, humanitarian work. And usually, when you are that conscious, you make sure that your children are also conscious.
That's right. Long, long history in your family of consciousness, activism, and you couldn't be anything but what you are. Let's talk a moment about what happened with the assassination of your dad, which has been, as I call it, a bad kept secret by the authorities all these years. Clarity about the real killer has never been made officially, and recently, two men, Norman Freaks Butler and Thomas 15, arrested and jailed for it, were exonerated. On April 28th, Benjamin Crump, aka the DA for Black America, announced in a press conference at the Shabazz Center that you're suing the US government, the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD for $100 million for allegedly conspiring to kill Malcolm X. This is a very important thing. It's a, it must be a very frightful thing to do because you are a woman who's going against institutions like that, but you got that courage. Tell us what it took to do that.
My father did the work that he did because he only feared God.
Yes.
And so it was his moral compass that allowed him to speak truth to power. And so it's only right that the truth of who killed my father and why he was killed. And then for me, for my mother to have endured that trauma, much like our foreparents,
Yes.
or even Palestinians, even Congolese,
Mhm.
even, Sudanese
Sudanese.
people,
Mm.
we go down the list. People in the South, people up here in the North, the injustices, the inhumanity, people in Mexico, I mean, it's like it's all over the world
Yes.
when it's not necessary. And so, because of this story that was told, the mischaracterization of my father, who was a beautiful young man, right, who believed in humanity,
Yeah.
he believed liberty and justice for all citizens, not just a select few. And so I think it's important to understand who killed him and why he was killed. And let his legacy be vindicated
Thank you.
for the benefit of future
everybody.
generations.
Yes. We are finishing right here on this note because our time is up. I want to thank you so much. This was really touching me. Thank you for being on my Harlem Portrait.
It's my honor, Maria. It's such an honor, and I'm glad that we were finally able to do it.
Love you, Bella.
I love you more. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.